I want to talk to you about 10 podcast promotion hacks that always work. So if you are trying to really let's say you are trying to promote your podcast, you're trying to really reach a lot of new listeners, you're trying to really get into a podcast directories here, you want to watch this show. So hack number 1, let's talk about before you launch anything. So you want to start with a listener in mind. The question is, you're doing a podcast, okay, this is your voice, but you're talking to someone, you're sharing information with someone. And you got to really start with a listener, because the listener is who's going to determine your podcast success. So think about what the listener will want to hear. Okay, you want to consider creating an audience persona. This will help paint a picture of your ideal listener. And this in turn will help you create custom content your listeners will love. You need to identify your niche. So differentiate your podcast from others to enjoy less competition. So by actually narrowing your podcast remit, people will have a better idea of who the show is for and what they stand to gain by listening. Remember, you need to also identify your USP. What is a USP? Your unique sales personality. In other words, what are you selling? Okay, what is really differentiating you? So when we talk about your USP, you need to have a clear idea what your podcast is about. Okay, what is your unique selling proposition, not personality, your unique selling proposition. And you also want to create a quality product. So when we talk about you actually doing, like if you are trying to launch a podcast, make sure the quality is there, because people are not going to be attracted to poor quality, to crappy quality. You want to pick a great title. I mean, there's no pressure here, but it's important to brand your podcast the right way from the get-go. You also need to nail your podcast description, because your podcast description is not just for your listeners, your prospective listeners, but it's also for search engines. You want to use a podcast logo or artwork that is really great. You want to build your audience before launch. You want to pick your launch date carefully. You want to experiment. It's all about trials and errors. And while you're doing it, be consistent. You also need to have your branding elements ready to go. You need to ensure you have an attractive, usable landing page just in case. You want to create a podcast press kit if possible. And if possible, send press releases. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. We are going to have a great conversation today about the top 10 podcast promotion hacks that always work. So I just shared with you things that you have to do before launch, right? Now let's talk about what you have to do on launch day, or let's say on launch a few days after launching. It's important to really understand that you need to start promoting with 5 or more episodes. So if you have 1 episode or 2 episodes, you're not going to have the traction that you need to actually start promoting. So wait for 2, 3, 4, 5 episodes so that you have a critical mass, so to speak, before you can actually start reaching out to prospective listeners there. And you want to promote hard in the first 2 weeks. Because see, the thing is that we live in a world where people's attention span is very limited. So if you promote after 3, 4, 5 weeks, you're just wasting your time. The first 2 weeks are where the juice is at, where things are still fresh and folks are interested in your story. So this is where you want to really push hard. So first 2 weeks, and you want to focus CTAs on leaving a review on Apple Podcast and Spotify Podcast. It's important to really, CTAs, we're speaking about call to actions. So you're telling listeners to leave a review. And again, you have to accept negative reviews too. So if you're asking people to leave reviews, be comfortable with the truth. Okay, so if they leave not so good reviews, it's okay. It's okay. At least you have a clear idea what to improve on, right? You want to throw a launch party if possible. You know, whether real or virtual, a party can help you let off steam, celebrate achievements, and attract interested people. And you want to upload more frequently early on. So when we talk about having the right podcast strategy, everything revolves around consistency. It's not about just doing one podcast, whatever, but you have to be consistent. Now, let me talk to you about routine promotion. When we talk about routine promotion here, I'm sharing with you tactics for the life of your podcast promotion. So you want to schedule your episodes strategically. Very important. You want to consider your podcast themes. Remember, the theme is going to narrow down the kind of listeners you are attracting to your podcast. You want to send your newsletter every time you publish an episode so you can keep people in the loop. You want to limit promotion during your podcast episodes. Don't actually promote all the time. Otherwise, people will be tired of your podcast. And you want to include a CTA during each episode. Now, the CTA might be different. The call to action might be different. Don't have 2 or 3 CTAs. Only have 1. You want to include a mailbag section. Okay, and remember that when we talk about the best promotion hacks, imagery always helps. And if needed, join a podcast network so you can actually beef up your promotion techniques. By the way, boss, I want to remind you of today's topic. I'm talking to you about the top 10 podcast promotion hacks that always work. Hack number 4. Let's talk about teamwork. So when we talk about teamwork, we're talking about, you need to understand that teamwork makes the dream work, right? So you want to list in the big podcast directory. So we're speaking about Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play Podcast. Those are really great. Now, Google Play is just fantastic. So those 3, Apple and Spotify and Google, are just fantastic. But Apple and Spotify are the top 2. Okay. And the thing is that you want to list with these big players to get automatic listings on other directories and to ensure that people can listen to your podcast, whether they use iPhone or Android. You want to list with niche podcast directories. So once you are in with if you're in with the big directories, listing with smaller directories will help increase your digital footprint and help you bring additional targeted traffic. Every little helps, especially if you're new. You also want to submit to other podcatchers. Okay. So we're talking about Castro, iHeart. You have podcasts you have a lot of players out there. You have TuneIn. You want to leverage your professional network. Remember, the whole thing is about teamwork. So you want to leverage your professional network. And you also can leverage your personal network, your entourage, folks you know, your family, and stuff like that. This is really important. You want to seek and mention official brand partners. When it comes to podcast promotion, supporting another brand can pay dividends, literally. So if a brand and its audience are aligned with your podcast, featuring it on your show officially can help attract the right people. Reach out to brands you mentioned. You want to seek regular sponsorship. It's all about monetizing your content, right? Because if you want your podcast to actually to stay in this industry and to actually outlive the competition, so to speak, you want to have money. Money is actually important, and sponsorship can really help you, give you that liquidity, that financial wherewithals that you need to survive in the long run. Trying to connect with influencers. Okay, if you get employees, you've got a network. Your employees can also bring new listeners to your show. Leverage Facebook groups. And last but not the least, you want to comment on other podcasts. It's important. If you post your podcast details, a CTA or a smiley face, this is actually spam. Create a valuable comment by taking the time to respond thoughtfully, stimulate debate, and provide a unique perspective in addition to leaving your podcast details. Hack number 5. Let's talk about SEO. Quickly, I want to quickly remind you that this is actually the top 10 podcast promotion hacks that always work. So number 1, before launch. Number 2, on launch. Number 3, routine promotion. Number 4, teamwork. Number 5, SEO. So when we talk about SEO, you have a constellation of hacks here. So we're talking about, now, first of all, you have to understand, when we talk about SEO for podcast promotion, SEO applies to podcasts too, right? Because Google now crawls audio material. As a matter of fact, Google has its own podcast directory. So the algorithm can actually search, can include it really helps to include keyword phrases during your episodes, especially towards the beginning, but be natural about it. Choose your keywords carefully. You want to craft podcast episodes titles. So you want to use your keyword or keywords as close to the beginning of the title as possible. The episode number, for example, should go at the end of the title, not at the beginning. Use SEO for your podcast website. Make transcripts. You want to create show notes as well. This is really important. You want to turn a podcast into a blog post if possible. Number 6, let's talk about what we call karma vibes. In other words, we have a win-win cross promotion. So be a guest be a guest. I mean, as a guest on another podcast, you get to pitch yourself. So instead of focusing on reaching out to the other shows and listeners, aim to give good value and be the living embodiment of your brand. People who enjoy listening to you will follow you back to your podcast. You can also interview a guest. So every guest you have on your show offers something new and dynamic to your audience and increases the goodwill and word of mouth that you need to grow anyway. So you can connect with your guest audiences, have a guest plug your show, for instance. So whether on or off air, you can ask your guest to say something nice about your show so that you can use the quote as a soundbite. So a great quote from a personality can boost your social proof and set a tone of authority for your podcast. You can encourage your guests to promote the show, for instance. Cross-promote with relevant podcasts if needed. Leverage YouTube. YouTube is really great here. You can also upload podcast videos to YouTube, for instance. You can chop up your YouTube video podcast recording, for example. This is also another important element here. You can throw parties, and you can run a giveaway. So this is kind of cool. So bottom line here is we want to get into what we call karma vibes. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. I'm having a conversation about the top 10 podcast promotion hacks that always work. So, number 6 was karma vibes. Number 7, we have social media. So when we talk about social media, you want to use social media for podcast promotion. And again, when we talk about social media, be very picky where you are active on social media, because nowadays you have a constellation of social media platforms from Facebook to Instagram to X, formerly Twitter, to LinkedIn. So be very picky where you are active, and you want to create a social media content calendar. So this will be really great for you in terms of spreading the word around your podcast. You want to use tech to manage social media. So, apps like Buffer or Hootsuite can help you keep your social media promotion manageable, really. Use hashtags all the time, because when we talk about hashtags, those are not just only for Twitter, now X. You want to use them on social media to help connect your post with people who are interested in the subject matter. And you want to choose them carefully, though, to maximize accuracy and reach. And you want to work on your profiles, for instance, and trying to have honest conversation that add value. It's not just about spreading the word about your podcast, but it's really about adding value. And you want to try to create a community. And remember, there is something called the 80-20 rule. So as a rule of thumb, aim for 80% of your social media posts to provide value to the reader. The remaining 20% can be promotional. And you want to ask open questions. You want to encourage meaningful, thoughtful discussion and add interest to your podcast episodes. And remember that all social media platforms are different. So if you're on Instagram, make sure that you understand the rules that actually govern Instagram. And those rules are different from what happens on Facebook or TikTok or YouTube. So adapt to the platform. You want to tease 24 hours before your next podcast episodes, so you're creating some kind of buzz. And you want to post updates to social media as soon as the episode is live. It's important. You want to also create and share attractive quote graphics. Okay, you can use a Canva or Pablo to create them. You share short soundbites. You want to share more than once, and also post behind the scenes content, so people have a clear idea what's happening in your world. This is really important. And you also can actually use Overcast to create and share clips. You can actually reference your show during relevant discussions, and you can share your YouTube content via social media, for instance. Use audiogram teasers. Create a Twitter card, post an episode screenshot on Instagram, for instance. This really works fantastically. Also, don't forget, ask for feedback. Okay. The bottom line here is you want to actually be true to your values. You want to look out for new social networks, and you want to keep things simple for your listeners. Bottom line here is that you are trying to really do an across the board social media promotion, but be very specific and be very focused. The bottom line is you want to use social media platforms that are in sync with what your target audience wants and need, by the way. Let me talk to you about hack number 8. Let's talk about multi-year podcast promotion. So when we talk about multi-year podcast promotion, we're having a conversation about long-term podcast promotion. So keep your head while scaling. So basically, if your podcast is growing, this is kind of cool, but be very measured here, and do not expect or demand dramatic results overnight. So continuing to produce consistent quality podcasting and promotion will lead to results. Okay. And so whatever you do, make changes incrementally and test the results. And you want to use your email signatures, change your email signatures to promote each new episode, include one or two of your most popular shows where appropriate at similar signatures where you post publicly. Look out for evergreen content. Okay. You want to measure your efforts so we can improve what we measure. So use tracking codes or other techniques to measure the effectiveness of your podcast promotion. Use your podcast analytics, very important. By understanding which topics resonate best, you can focus on promoting those and create more like them. Make the most of Apple Podcast Analytics. This service will offer you useful insights, including the moment people drop out of your episodes. Not only will this help you create more engaging podcasts, knowing what people like about your podcast will guide you as to what aspects to promote. And you want to promote your back catalog also. This is very important. And when we talk about back catalog, we're talking about the fact that your podcast episodes don't become irrelevant after going live. Keep an eye on trends and techniques. You also keep an eye on help a reporter out. So by providing your services as an authority in your field, you can help out a reporter and get valuable mentions for your podcast. And also consider an RSS swap. So the thing is that RSS feeds remain useful, and one way to use them for podcast promotion is to swap RSS feeds with another podcast. So by placing your RSS on their feeds, their listeners can get access to your content, helping new people discover your shows. So this is really great, especially for a long-term strategy. If you're trying to really reach out to a new community of listeners, it's important to consider an RSS swap. But please don't do this like continual. You can do this once in a while, but don't do this continually though. This is really just great as an occasional strategy. Hack number 9. Let's talk about paid ads. So when we talk about paid ads, we're speaking about paid ads for podcast promotion. So you can pay for ads on podcast apps. So here I'm talking about Spotify. You can consider Pocket Cast. You can consider Overcast. So you can do a lot of ads on podcast apps. The good thing is that if you actually advertise on podcast listening apps, you are pretty sure that people whom you're targeting, they already listen to podcasts. That's for sure, right? And this is really good. And you can also try Google AdWords. So use this service to attract more targeted traffic to your podcast landing page. So using podcast ads is an especially good idea if your podcast answers a question. If you know your audience and your podcast answers one of their top questions, investigate Google Ads. It's great for generating traffic with affordable keywords that relate to your show. You can also try advertising on Facebook. I mean, Facebook is fantastic because first of all, you have a huge user base already, and even better, you can actually focus on a specific demographic very effectively. One thing I want to say here is that when we talk about ads in general, be very specific and be very focused. You want to keep your ads to the point. Okay. Now, every now and then you can have sensational ads. Yeah. Those grab attention. Don't get me wrong, but the bottom line is you want to convert. That's what you want. You want a high conversion rate, right? So you want your ads to convert. So make sure your ads attractive, but also relevant so that more people will click and also listen to an episode or subscribe. And hack number 10, you have handshaking. So you want to get out of your chair to promote your podcast. So you can promote your podcast offline, for instance. You can actually share business cards about the podcast. You want to create and use your own merchandise, for instance. This works fantastically. Attend related conferences and trade shows, because the bottom line here is you need to talk about your shows, but you need to get out there. Nobody's doing it for you. You can't just do it electronically. At some point, you got to really get out there and shake hands. And you can attend local meetups. Don't underestimate the power of word of mouth, nor your ability to be your best brand ambassador. And you want to talk spontaneously. So you don't always have to be strategic when it comes to podcast promotion. The important thing is to help people find your podcast. So if you are creating a podcast, talking will be your thing. So go ahead and tell people about your show, whatever you are. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. In today's conversation, I just share with you the top 10 podcast promotion hacks that always work. So I'm going to quickly go through this with you. Number 1, before lunch. Number 2, on lunch. Number 3, routine promotion. Number 4, teamwork. Number 5, SEO. Number 6, karma vibes. Number 7, social media. Number 8, we have a multi-year podcast promotion. Number 9, paid ads. And number 10, handshake it. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll speak to you another time. But until then, remember, stay marvelous.